Hello everyone, welcome back to Dieu Han's journey. Wishing you all a wonderful new day. Thank you for always accompanying Dieu Han throughout this time. Han's house is still undergoing renovations. The old roof layers, worn down by time, are being carefully dismantled. Thanks to Than's help, everything is progressing much faster. The man who once harbored plans to destroy and drive Han away is now the one helping to rebuild the house. Perhaps what has happened has changed him in a strange way. While Han and Than were busy working, Dan returned with another man, who was an uncle in Than's command. Knowing Han's situation, he came directly to help. Han smiled, sincerely thanking everyone for helping her. Under the bare frame of the house, everyone discussed how to work most efficiently. Uncle Sam and Than stayed behind to reinforce the frame, while Dan and Han went to cut grass for the roof. The usual quiet scene suddenly became lively with the roar of the tractor engine. Han and Dan sat together on the old tractor, the only vehicle capable of transporting materials in this poor rural area. The vast grass field stretched out before them. Each person worked with one hand, cutting and neatly stacking bundles of grass. This was the material to be used for the roof after drying and binding into sturdy sheets. As beads of sweat soaked Dan and Han's faces, the tractor was loaded with grass. Just then, rain began to fall, and the tractor roared again as the two hurried back. On the other side, Than and Uncle Sam, along with the command team, were cutting bamboo to reinforce the house frame. The house, which had been bare yesterday, was now beginning to change completely, about to be clad in a new coat. Everyone was happy and hopeful. The sky was very gloomy at this time, and while everyone was busy working, a sudden rain shower came, forcing the house repairs to pause. The only place left in the whole house to shelter from the rain was a small corner of the kitchen. It was already late in the afternoon, but the rain was getting heavier, so Than and Uncle Sam had no choice but to leave. Only Han and Dan remained, listening to the heavy rain falling. When the rain subsided a little, Han and Dan didn't wait any longer. They took the newly purchased tarp and tried to climb onto the roof to cover it temporarily, protecting the belongings inside the house, fearing that the rain would continue. Under the cold wind and drizzling rain, each corner of the tarp was carefully stretched out, as if protecting the small house that was in the process of being reborn. After finishing the tarp, the two went back down to clean the house. Puddles of rainwater remained, but everyone's hearts warmed knowing that the house was gradually taking on a new shape. Not long after, Han picked up little Tom. Under the roof that was changing day by day, the laughter of mother and child rang out, dispelling the gloom of yesterday. The house was still unfinished, but it was beginning to feel like a real home. Seeing this, Dan felt more at ease. He quietly said goodbye to the mother and child and left. The country road after the rain was still wet, but Dan's heart felt strangely light. It had been a hard day, but it was also a meaningful one for him. Another day dawns for Han and her child, but their joy remains as fragile as the house whose roof is still unfinished. Just when it seemed that after so much hardship, life had finally offered a glimmer of hope, another difficulty immediately struck, pushing Han into a dead end. Faced with mounting adversity, one can't help but wonder, how will Han carry on? Does she have the strength to stand firm, or will she succumb to fate? As the first rays of morning sunlight filtered through the window, Han gently awoke. She opened the door, tended to the chickens, and checked around the small house as she did every morning. But after just a few steps, Han's face turned pale, her eyes filled with panic. She screamed when she discovered a poisonous snake right in front of her. In that moment, death seemed very close. Fortunately, Han's screams attracted the attention of the garden owner and his son. Than quickly ran over, subdued the snake, and released it back into the wild. Escaping danger by a hair's breadth, Dieu Han gradually regained her composure, but her heart was still pounding with fear. Before she could recover, the sound of baby Tom crying suddenly echoed through the house. Han rushed inside and found the child crying more and more violently, his body burning hot, showing signs of a high fever. Seeing this, the landowner couldn't help but feel worried. Without hesitation, he turned the car around and rushed Han and her child to the nearest medical station, hoping to prevent the worst from happening. A morning that seemed peaceful turned into a series of consecutive incidents. From the poisonous snake at the door to her young child's fever, Everything seemed to test the young mother's resilience. And it was precisely in those difficult moments that viewers felt even more clearly, Han's will to live was not only to survive, but also to protect her child in a life full of storms. The hospital door closed behind Han and her child, but the door of worry opened in her heart. The doctors quickly took over, diligently administering first aid to make little Tom more comfortable. Seeing her child's fever temporarily subside and his breathing even out, Han still couldn't relax. Her face still bore a look of shock, as one thought haunted her mind. What if this fever was a sign of a terrible disease? Carrying that unease, Han sought out the doctor privately to ask for clarification, but the answer was vague. More time was needed to monitor and make an accurate diagnosis. For now, the doctor only instructed Han on how to reduce the fever, wipe the baby down, and monitor even the smallest signs. Those gentle words were like knives cutting into the heart of a mother worried about her child. When Han returned to the room, little Tom had fallen asleep. Beside her was the landlord, his eyes full of worry and sadness. Since meeting Han, he had witnessed so much misfortune befall her, from poverty to calamity, from worries about her home to worries about her children. Looking at the mother and child lying there, he could only sigh, feeling sorry for her, but not knowing how to help enough. At that moment, a thought suddenly flashed through Han's mind: to ask for help from Aunt Kwa, the woman who had taken her in, treated her like her own daughter, and was the benefactor Han had always cherished in her heart. She hoped that in this time of crisis, the kindness she had once given would be reciprocated. Sitting by the bed, her hands trembling as she held the phone borrowed from the landlord, Han quickly called Aunt Kwa and told her everything about little Tom. On the other end of the line, as soon as she heard the news, Aunt Kwa choked up and said without hesitation that she would find a way to help, hoping that Tom would get well soon. Hearing this, Han burst into tears, both happy and sad. Amidst life's many hardships, there were still kind people like Mr. Kwa, willing to lend a hand when she was at her wit's end. But the joy was short-lived. The call had barely ended, her tears not yet dried, when the door burst open. The doctor walked in, his face stern. Just one sentence was enough to pour cold water on Han's heart. Tom's condition was showing signs of complications and needed to be transferred to a higher-level hospital immediately for fear of danger. Han's ears rang, her legs felt weak, but she couldn't allow herself to collapse. She still had her child, she had to be strong. Together with the landlord, Han hurriedly carried little Tom to the car and left the hospital in a state of turmoil. The road ahead was unclear, but she knew that every turn of the wheels was another test for the young mother in the storm of fate. At Han's small, unfinished house, Dan came with the hope of helping her finish the roof before the rain and wind returned. He called Han's name over and over, but only the wind answered with cold, rustling sounds. Dan had no idea that while he stood there waiting, Han was struggling with worries about little Tom's health at the hospital. Stepping inside, the scene before him surprised Dan. Blankets were scattered, belongings were in disarray. This was strange, because Han was a tidy person, always trying to keep her poor house as neat as possible. A feeling of unease flashed through him. But then Dan reassured himself that perhaps Han was busy with something urgent. Not seeing Han, Dawn went out to the yard, quietly sweeping and trimming the trees to make them look neat, hoping that when Han returned, she would be happy. As he worked, he kept looking out at the small road, waiting for a familiar figure to appear. But time passed. The yard was clean, the trees were trimmed, and Han was still nowhere to be seen. Meanwhile, at the higher-level hospital, Han held little Tom as they waited for their turn for the follow-up examination. Her heart pounded with each beat, her hands clutching the test results as if afraid that letting go would mean letting go of all hope. When the doctor returned with the results, Han trembled as she took them. Reading each line, listening to the doctor's explanation, she finally breathed a sigh of relief. It was just a common childhood illness, and a few days of medication and treatment would be enough. In that moment, Han felt a heavy weight lift from her heart. Tears fell again, but this time they were tears of relief. She hugged little Tom tightly and whispered, "Hang in there, sweetie, we'll be home soon." Little did she know that, in that small house, Dawn was still patiently waiting. hoping to see Han walk through the door with her familiar smile once more. Meanwhile, at the hospital, little Tom was being carefully monitored by the doctors, who checked his vital signs thoroughly. Finally, they made a firm decision. He would have to stay in the hospital for a few days for observation and treatment to ensure his safety. Hearing this news, Han's heart sank. She was worried but didn't dare say anything, because her mind was filled with two overlapping concerns. On one hand, the unfinished house and how to manage it, and on the other, her little child lying in the hospital bed. Alone, she didn't know how to bear so many things at once. Seeing Han silent, her eyes filled with emotion, the landlord seemed to understand everything. He gently stepped out of the room, closed the door softly, then secretly called his son, Thon. He briefly explained Han and baby Tom's situation, instructing Thon to buy some supplies and food and come visit the two of them soon. On the other end of the line, Thon listened silently, then nodded in agreement. His heart ached as he thought of Han, a young woman whose fate had forced her to bear so many hardships. He sighed, telling himself he would go right away, hoping to help ease some of the difficult days ahead for Han.